Hello, everybody. My name is Maurice Button. I'm the CEO of City and Financial Global, and it's my great pleasure to be interviewing this morning Avivah Wittenberg Cox, who's the CEO of 21st, which is a global consulting firm. Avivah is kindly going to be speaking at our upcoming Women in Finance Summit on the 5th of July at the America Square Conference Centre in London. Welcome, Avivah.
Thank you. Lovely to be with you, Maurice.
Our pleasure entirely. Let's turn to the questions. One of the main themes of City and Financial Global's upcoming Women in Finance Summit is redesigning work, life and money in an age of longevity. In your opinion, what does longevity and life's 4 quarters mean for women's careers and dual career couples as well?
That's a big question, so there are several parts to it, and I will try and answer succinctly. I think it means a lot of things and a lot of potential opportunities. So post-COVID, I think there's obviously been a major shift in attitudes to work and career. I think we're seeing that, the whole debate about work from home, but I also think there's a larger underlying trend, which is the demographic shifts that are the result of our aging societies, because not only are we aging much longer and living much longer, we're also having far less children, and birth rates are falling through the floor, which means that societies themselves are aging, and people will likely have to work much longer than they have in the past. We're talking now 50 or 60-year careers. And I talk about 4-quarter lives. If you imagine that we're going to live, many of us, to be 100, or certainly at least half the children born today are predicted to live towards 100, I simplify this by saying, okay, we're going to live these 4 quarters, each of 25 years long. And I think what we're seeing is that the work and careers have been almost essentially designed with only Q2, that second quarter from 25 to 50 in mind. Career cycles, career plans, the management of talent inside organizations is all really looking at those ages of 25 to 50, when the reality now is that there's this new thing that I call the third quarter, that are the 25 years after 50, that are really going to be a new sort of second adulthood, second chapter of careers and work, that I think potentially offer to everybody, but women in particular, who may have been real jugglers in Q2, trying to do all the things that one does in Q2, have children, raise families, take care of parents, build careers. There's a lot to do in Q2, and it's really hard, as many have discussed, to do it all and have it all. But the emergence of Q3, this extra bonus time that we've been given in the last half century, is kind of promised land for some of us. And I think for women in particular, give us this second lease on life and careers that I predict will be, at least for the sort of educated, privileged class that we're part of, women's peak career years.
That's a very interesting concept. When you get to the Q3, do you think there's going to be a need, given the speed of technological developments, for retraining? I mean, are people going to plot different careers? Are they going to stay in the same careers? Do you think that there'll be need for more training in order to make the most of Q3 for most people, particularly women? Well, you know, men and women, it doesn't make any difference, but more training so that they can adapt to a vastly different working environment.
Yes, I think education, training, and upskilling is going to have to be the big revolution of this time. It's all very nice to live to be 100, but you also have to be of some value and utility for yourself and others around you. And I think the idea that we have front-loaded education into the first quarter almost entirely is completely obsolete already now for a number of years. And we've been talking about lifelong learning forever. And very few countries and companies actually do it effectively into Q3. But that's going to have to change when Q1 dries up, which is basically what it's doing now. Talent shortages are going to become the norm in countries all over the world. And if we don't know how to upskill, reskill, and reinvent pretty well every decade at the pace of change now, we're just not going to survive.
What does all of that mean for leadership and for workplace culture? Do you think that there'll have to be a change in the approach to leadership, a more adaptive culture? I mean, as you say, there's a need for whole life learning. So how are those two elements of culture and leadership going to have to evolve?
Well, I think it depends very much on what the current culture of leadership in your organization or country is. It differs enormously. Some countries and companies have managed to create workplaces where there's a co-creation between employer and employee on the terms of work, the quality of work, the amount of productivity that's being delivered, well managed and well led. I think companies become much more adaptable to whatever changes are thrown at them. I think the issue is I always say it's very interesting, having now spent 20 years on gender balancing companies, which took a lot of work on the 3 pillars you mentioned. It took adapting leadership mindsets to the possibility of gender balance in leadership. It took adapting cultures to be less really masculine skewed. And it took adapting systems like, career cycles to realize that not all careers had to be upward, linear, unbroken, and heavily emphasizing the 30s and the 40s, which really put women into a difficult position. So I think everything's going to change with this new rapport between the scarcity of talent and the demands, and how leaders, do they understand that shift? Do they work with it? Or do they do what we're seeing a lot around the world, is just say, no, we're going back to the old ways and there's no working from home and I want to see you in the office 5 days a week? I think it's a pretty good indicator of whether those companies are going to adapt or not.
Yeah, no, I agree with that entirely. There seems to be an increasing anxiety amongst men in the business world about their position and whether promoting women's equality has in some way introduced some discrimination against them. The various surveys, Ipsos report, and others suggest that I've read pieces in the media, mainstream media as well. What can be done to change this? It seems to be an overreaction, I suspect, to the situation. And obviously one needs men to be part of the drive towards inclusion and diversity. And is there a danger that this sort of anxiety undermines that a bit? How can that be addressed?
Totally. I mean, listen, I have been on this topic for quite a long time. The very obvious and pretty predictable backlash of men against, we weren't, the vocabulary and framing of so much work on the gender topic is unfortunate and a little passé. And I think we could have switched much earlier from promoting women to promoting and building gender balance, with the idea that we want a balance of men, women, and all of the other new genders in the workplace that reflects the societies and talent we have. We don't only want the promotion of women into leadership to the exclusion of men. And I always tease women who are always arguing inclusion that we are some of the least inclusive people in the world when it comes to engaging men into the conversation on gender balancing. And it takes skill and will to get men involved in a way that they find attractive. And it's not by running women's conferences that we're going to get men involved. It's by reframing the entire issue of gender balance as a strategic priority led by the executive team that fits it and explains it as a business imperative, that we make any progress at all.
Yeah, I agree with that entirely. I think if it's framed in the way that you're talking about, what is optimum for the business? Clearly, what is optimum is to make the most of all the talents you have. And that means you have to have absolute gender balance, and you make the most of all the talents there. Finally, there's been a bit of a debate about a long-standing debate about the pension divide between men and women and the unfairness of the system that's skewed towards men. How do you think this could be addressed? What's the outlook on that issue?
Yeah, well, there's this massive gender pension gap. We talk about it not enough. We talk about the gender wage gap, but the gender pension gap is actually much worse, and it's going to be particularly accentuated because of our aging societies. So I think already shining a spotlight on it, it's very obvious that it comes from the fact that women's working patterns over time are more disrupted. They don't tend to be as steady. What I've never understood is that these pension systems are so individualized when a lot of people live in families and couples. And I don't know why we haven't been better at suggesting right from the beginning that pensions should be mutualized within families that create the dependence that a lot of these pensions are nourished by. So I think there's a systemic design problem on pensions where you obviously have men who have career patterns that are so different from women and care responsibilities that remain so different that the only way out of this gender pension gap is to put these genders somehow together and to mutualize these differences. We do it for car insurance. I don't know why we can't do it for pensions. And I am not the finance expert, but I think a little bit of innovation and creativity in the space would be really welcome. We can't just whinge on about this awful gap and then not be able to come up with some kind of solutions.
Yeah, I suspect that a lot of this is to do with the fact that the pensions were designed many, many, many decades ago. And the complexity that's built into them probably is resistant to change. But I agree with you, there's a very strong case for that, Avivah. Sadly, we've run out of time, but we will be looking at these issues and discussing them in much more detail at the Women in Finance Summit on the 5th of July. So we very much hope that our viewers of this video interview will be able to join us in person in London on the 5th of July. It only remains for me to say thank you very much, Avivah, for sharing those very interesting insights with us.
I hope we find some solutions on the ground.
We will try.
Thanks, Boris.
Thank you.